a lot of funny things came up. I think you guys are lucky. You work with birth, and that's a miracle. And it's also hard when it doesn't go in the right way. So here's what we're going to try to do. We're not. You've already been taken around the world. We're actually landing in a country, and it's brilliant that we were preceded by the presentation that we were preceded by, because it highlighted the importance of contextual reality. Brazil is a massive country, and it has many different realities throughout. So we are going to talk about the country as a whole, knowing that within the country there's some variation. As you may already know, Brazil has the highest rate of C-sections in the world. And we're going to describe some efforts that we're undertaking in partnership with Hospital Israelita Albert Einstein, which is the institution that Rita is from, with ANS, which is the National Regulatory Agency for the Private Sector, and the Ministry of Health. Initially with a group of 42 hospitals, and now with 137, with an ambition to take it to the entire country. These are the three key messages, I think. The program is called Parto Adequado. That in English means appropriate birth. And we're making some progress with it. We're scaling it up, so we went 5x. So we went from 25 to 135, a little more than 5x. And then we wanted to ensure that we had some messages for the anesthetist community, I suppose. And Rita's going to frame some of the pain management opportunities and challenges, I suppose, that we're facing right now. But we're going to start with context, and Rita's going to take you through the context of Brazil. She lives and breathes there every single day.
Thank you, everyone, for the invitation. I'm here since 9 today, and you are amazing, and we have the same problems in Brazil, even with the obstetricians or anesthetics. And this is a great graphic that shows us, let's see if I can here. This shows us the percentage of C-sections, and here the maternal mortality. And we see Brazil here with a huge C-section percentage. We have an average 56% of C-sections. That is a huge one, right? And we don't have the less maternal mortality. We have between 6 and 7 per 100,000. And we see here too that less than 10% we have the countries that has the high maternal mortality. And everybody knows we have a lot of evidence in literature, but this is one that everybody knows, that the C-section is higher mortality and morbidity for mothers and for babies. And we know that a booked C-section without labor has higher morbidity for babies, respiratory morbidity. What do we have in private sectors in Brazil? I said 56% is an average. We have in private sector 85% of C-sections. It's too much. Unfortunately, it's the highest in the world, I think. Yeah, we lose the Mundial of football, but we are the highest in C-section. Terrible. And in the private sector, we have different incentives, depends on the hospital, but mainly fee-for-services. We have more than 100 health insurances in private sector. And in the last 3 decades, we have the problem of exclusivity between patients and this doctor of prenatal care, and they want this doctor, his clinician, in the labor room. So I have to come and run to the hospital when the patient starts the labor to assist only one patient. In private sector, they can't, how can I say, trust. They can't trust the doctors on duty in the private sector. And in our public sector, it's the opposite. There are only labors with doctors on duty. This is how our system is designed. We have many problems because in these 3 decades, we diminish the space to accommodate hours of labors, because if you are doing 85% of C-sections, and C-sections we do in 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, the hospitals doesn't have anymore the labor delivery rooms. And we know that Latin patients are fear of pain. We have 1 or 2 articles in Brazil of Brazilian patients that show that the first problem of patient in labor is fear of pain. It's because I'm here. And the context in last decades show us a women's movement called obstetric violence. You present this in the morning. We have 2. And some women write this document. Is a 200 pages document. And this phrase, parirás com dor, is like a commitment, Moses' commitment. You have to give birth with pain. And they give this to our prosecutors, and they start a movement to change the number of C-sections and to change the problems of pain in the public and private sectors. Here we have many of maternities closed because of the system. So we had to do something. And the prosecutor sued ANS, is a regulatory agency from Ministry of Health, and they start with 3 norms that didn't work. The partogram, they oblige the partogram, the pregnancy booklet, because patients who doesn't want the C-section could change the doctors and bring their booklets. And the insurances could show us to everyone, to papers, to newspapers, the percentage of C-section of each doctor. This was terrible too. The doctors start a new movement against ANS because they said this is not the way. And meanwhile, a faculty of IHI, Paulo Borém, start a work that Pedro will tell us, and this starts our idea of project. Pedro?
Yeah, so in the middle of what I would call maybe a burning platform, which is this lawsuit effectively against the National Regulatory Agency and this women's movement, there was an opportunity and there was hope in some places. That's the percentage of vaginal deliveries. It went from 0% to 43%. In a short period of time, this piece of work was published. And we had some ideas that it was possible to change a reality that was way outside of the C-sections are appropriate. In fact, they're a fantastic intervention when it's clinically appropriate, not 85% of the time. So we knew that this reality of close to 100% of C-sections could be changed, and it would have consequences on babies, on mothers, and also on costs. So we started with, again, with the partners mentioned before. We had a call from the National Regulatory Agency, and just to simplify the key message there, they said, look, we're in trouble. We've been regulating the sector, we've been putting rules out, we've been putting guidelines out, and it's not making a difference. Clinicians are not undertaking the guidelines and the protocols in the way that we've designed them, and we are regulating, they're doing whatever they want. So they've been doing it for the last 8 years. Instead of dropping the C-section rate, it's gone up from 75% to 85% in the private sector. So they had a challenge, and they were looking for opportunities, and we thought improvement methods would be one, and if you're staying for the rest of the conference tomorrow on Friday, you'll hear hundreds of improvement stories. But essentially, we had a prototype with some ideas based on the work that Paolo and Jainer, the leader of that hospital, and the clinical teams and the patients and so on did together, which was brilliant. And we started working with the national regulatory agency. The framing for this was simple. We said, look, if we can demonstrate with a small group of hospitals from Brazil that this is possible, then we can start to create a movement. We'll use science to do it. We'll guide these hospitals. We'll frame the effort as a pioneering effort. So we called hospitals throughout Brazil and said, listen, whoever wants to be in this first group of pioneers to change a reality that's been so for a long time, please come. We met in Rio in the oncology center, if you remember, with a number of people. They applied, and we selected around 30. The group grew to 42. There were some people that wanted to be in the group, even though they hadn't been part of the application process and so on. But we supported intensively around 26 hospitals in the air. Okay, these were the 26 pioneers of this effort that was called Parto Adequado, and we used improvement science. We framed some ambitious goals, largely to double the rate of vaginal deliveries. We had a content theory that had science, evidence, and contextual reality within it, called the driver diagram. We had an execution theory. We used collaboratives. We had these 26 hospitals collaborating in a very transparent fashion. And we used data in real time to learn and to improve. And we are in a dissemination process right now. So the aim was clear. Over 18 months, we wanted to double the rate of vaginal deliveries from 20% to 40% in a segment of the population. Not for every mother and baby that walked into those hospitals, for a segment of the population. On phase one, we said to institutions, listen, we suggest that you think of a first-time mother, for instance. If somebody has already had a C-section, maybe that's not the group to start with. And we would ask you to think about a segment of your population that's at least 30% of the women that you treat. At least 30% of the women that you treat. We learned on phase two, which we launched last year, that we needed to be a bit more directive on that, and Rita will tell you why. We used a collaborative breakthrough series model where we had people come together. This is our first session again in Rio. We used a model for improvement with aims and measures and tests of change and so on. And we basically worked with institutions to drive change guided by an ambitious aim with some drivers. The drivers include creating coalitions, insurance companies, royal societies, and so on, aligned around the primacy of safety for mothers and babies. The second one is the toughest one, and I think we're still working very hard on it. It's on the partnership approach with mothers and babies. It's been very maternalistic throughout time. It's changing slowly. The third one, and Rita highlighted some of the challenges that we have with this dependency between an individual mother and one obstetrician as opposed to a team-oriented approach. A new care model to accommodate the longer time frame for normal physiological birth, and the fourth one, we needed to learn from data. The data collection systems were poor, the opportunity to learn hence was poor. You go from primary drivers to activities, and these activities were the things that they were focusing on. This was the guiding content theory vehicle, effectively, the driver diagram, to guide some of the change ideas that teams then started to test and implement using the model for improvement. So Rita's going to tell you about some of the pain management and the clinical issues that were underneath those four drivers.
Yeah, I said that we had that exclusivity between doctors and patients. It was a culture between the patients, among the patients, and some of management that we start to do was revisit all protocols. I put here the management in labor in general. We have non-pharmacological pain reliefs with walking, showers, movements at Pilates ball. You know, I think you know many of them. And the pharmacological, the IV sedation that in Brazil we don't use it so much, the epidural, and sometimes we use the combined puncture, the epidural with spinal, and the nitrous oxide that we don't use a lot too. What is the patient's vision about the management pain? The non-pharmacological pain relief they prefer because there is no intervention to mothers, no risk to fetus, and no presence of doctors, because in public sectors we have obstetric nurses doing the assisting births to the end. We don't have midwives in the country. We have only doctors and obstetrician nurses. This is our great problem too. And in the public sectors, the obstetrician nurses can assist the birth and call doctors only with an emergency for C-sections. And the non-pharmacological pain relief doesn't have the delay in labor. And the analgesia, the pharmacological analgesia, the mothers that want the natural birth, they say that there is a risk intervention, the venous punction, the perforation of dura mater, and the depression of fetus at time of birth. And we need the doctors. So we have the non-pharmacological pain relief in the public sectors, using a lot, and the pharmacological analgesia in the private sector, using a lot too. There are so many patients that in the latent phase, with 2 centimeters, 3 centimeters in the beginning of labor, that they ask for epidural. And you know that we have a problem. We have to use first the non-pharmacological and after the epidural. We start then in the appropriate birth, the team training. We call all the doctors and nurses for action, and if we are doing 85% of C-sections, I realize that we lose our skills in labor and we need to training. Then we create a course in Albert Einstein Simulation Center that we talk about every problems in the labor, in the normal labor, in the dystocias, hemorrhagies, everything you can imagine, for doctors and nurses training together. Because in the real labor, they have to work together. And we lose this kind of multidisciplinary team in our birds. We create too this proposal of models of work because, as I said to you, in the public sectors we have the nurses and the obstetricians on duty. This was that Paulo did in Jaboticabal. Paulo broke this exclusivity between prenatal care and the birth, and he said the doctors who do the prenatal care, they won't participate in the birth. It was another team of doctors, and he could rise for 40% the normal births. But in private sector, we know that this doesn't work very well. Then the model 2, the obstetrician responsible for prenatal care, goes to the hospital, but first the hospital can care of the patient. In the latent phase, in the beginning of the labor, the staff of hospital and the nurses of hospitals are take care of this patient. And this obstetrician from the private office can arrive only in, I think, 6-7 centimeters in the labor, only to the analgesia. And the number 3 that we have now a lot, but we didn't have before, the obstetricians create teams in the private offices. I have a partner that do the C-sections with me, and maybe we can do the appointments with patients together. The patient knows me and the partner, and we don't know which one will assist the labor and birth. And some colleagues of mine said, no, I don't think it will work. The patient wants me at the labor. And I said, sorry. They like to know that they have 2 cell phones or 3 cell phones instead of 1. And it's working. And in this way, we could give a little step to what happens in Europe between you don't know your doctor or it's an exclusivity, you know a team that could stay there in your labor. This is the pilot phase. I don't know if Pedro wants to continue. In 18 months, we could start with 2 or 22% of natural birth. The beginning of collaborative was February 15, and you see that the training, the meetings with IHI, the improvement science works, and we reach 35-38% in 18 months. You want to talk about?
Yeah, just to make a couple of comments to link Rita's descriptions to the driver diagram. So we have a name, some primary drivers. One of them is new models of care. What Rita described is fundamentally a different paradigm of caring for women and babies in Brazil. It's an evolution. And if you look at this data, we were of course very excited. We celebrated it with the 26 hospitals. The WHO came. I mean, it was a big celebration, but there's a lot of work to do. We're only at almost 40%. There is a lot of work to do. We should be closer. The aim for the next phase of work is to get these brilliant institutions to 65%. That's a new aim for the institutions that were involved in phase 1. And of course, we were tracking patient satisfaction, costs, and so on. And this is just a sample of what that looks like in terms of neonatal ICU admissions and some of the reductions. So we went initially from 1 prototype to 26 hospitals with a very well-described theory of change, which is that driver diagram, a lot of clinical leadership, an attempt to partner with women and families and so on. And now we want more. We went for 5x scale-up. So the next phase of work is ongoing right now. In fact, Rita, I don't know when the last learning session was, but it was recently, and the next one will be in a couple of weeks, I think. We are working with 137 hospitals using a very systematic scale-up approach that considers the phases of scale-up from the start through to full scale, the adoption mechanisms around communication and leadership and engagement and so on, and the support systems that we need in order to get to full scale eventually. So we're halfway through phase 2, 137 hospitals. Our ambition is to get to the entire country of Brazil. You may be asking yourselves if this is only in the private sector. Large participation proportionately of private sector hospitals, but there is public hospital participation. And on phase 2, where we're working with 137 hospitals, there's around 25 public hospitals.
Yeah, 25.
25 public hospitals.
Ministry of Health asked us to put them because of the highest C-section rate.
Okay, and this is just a sample for you to get an idea of the hospitals for phase 2. We were more prescriptive on phase 2, so we said, listen, you have to choose a segment, and that segment has to be the lowest risk mothers. We don't want this to be a risky business. You need to do more vaginal deliveries in a safe way, so they took the Robson scale, and we said they need to be Robson 1 to 4. Anything above 4 does not enter into the work of trying to reduce C-section at this stage. So Rita, you want to talk a little bit about this and then get us through to the end?
Yeah, to scale up, we need help. Then we took the bright spots of the pilot phase. There were 10 hospitals that did very well, and the colleague of Harvard talk us about changing, about the book, The Switch. I read it, it's very good, I recommend. And we took the bright spots to help us to care with 10 or until 15 new hospitals. And then we have the national, let me show you. We have the national meetings that the IHI participate, and we have the regional meetings, learning together, showing each other what actions of changing they are doing. In our driver diagram, we start with 90 ideas of change. And then we see what works and what doesn't work. And then now we have 18 concepts of change. And in this kind of meetings, we learn about what they were doing and where they were reaching. And we disseminate to others. This is joint work. Yeah? A lot of people working together, doing a lot of PDSAs, and bring to home many ideas to continue. Many of the hospitals made building changes. They built the labor delivery rooms that didn't have. Was very good. And some points here. We grow up and we put in our technical team 2 patients, and 1 black patient and 1 Caucasian patient. And they revisited the driver diagram to us. It was very important. And we invite the societies. I made 3 appointments with FEBRASGO, that it's our National Society of OBGYN, and they didn't said anything. And after 18 months of project, they came to us and said, we need to help you, we want to participate of this project. And ABENFO is the Obstetric Nurses National Society, and now I'm in a work to do they working together. They do the protocols where the obstetric nurse have to call the doctors, where the doctors have to stay. You said here, doctors have to stay, midwife call, because we have too much autonomy of doctors in Brazil, and they are building integrated protocols. And the next steps is with the Anesthesiologist Society and Pediatrician Society. I'm almost there. And this is the initially phase 2 we have in 7 months. If you are looking for if you are hearing these improvement science lectures here, you see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points above the median, the average. Then we have a special cause here. Then we could change the average. It's slowly, but with security, because we have to look to the adverse events. We can't have more low apegars, more hemorrhage, because we are doing more natural births. We have to do this slowly and with security. And you see that we have a up curve, okay? In our challenges, the obstetricians has to respect the willing and trusted doctors on duty to do this. The anesthesiologist, we had a little resistance in the beginning of the project because they said, no, if I arrive at the hospital, I will do the epidural. Doesn't matter if you still use the shower, if you still use another non-pharmacological pain relief, because they said, if patient has pain, I have to do the epidural immediately. And what I ask here, not so early and not so late, the anesthesia. The anesthesia has, the analgesia has to be in the perfect time. And the nurses know how to deal with this until we can ask for the epidural. And we have to have a integrated work between obstetricians and anesthesiologists. I have one that it's my preference in the hospital, and I don't say to him, do the epidural now or do the spinal now. I say, I need an anesthesia about 3 hours and the mother has to walk. And he chooses what kind of procedure he will do. This is what we need. We need to talk each other. And we need the patients and families' engagement. Sometimes the mother of patients, the grandmother and the mother-in-law said, oh, she has pain. Oh no, do a C-section. We have to deal with this family and we have to prepare them in the prenatal care for this. And I think if we inform them the pain relief possibilities, this will be better. And how you can help? We know that a lot of patients ask us for a C-section because of pain. And sometimes they have fear of procedures. It's the two extremes. And we have said that we have a possibility of walking analgesia with minimal dose of drugs. I know you can do it. And if we use non-pharmacological pain relief to postpone epidural, we have less possibility of loose contractions, of arrested labor. You know it. This article shows us that when you explain to mother before labor that she can have analgesia, we reduce in 50% the maternal requests of C-section. It's very good. Then we have to put this issue in the birth plan. In the birth plan, the obstetrician has to talk with the patient about analgesia. And sometimes I bring my anesthesiologist to my private office to do an appointment with the patient before the labor. And our challenge is in Brazil is still in the public sectors because we don't have the analgesia, we don't have resources to have anesthesiologists on duty in all the maternities. We are working on this too. This is what I want for you. I'm here and by email to talk about the project with you. Thank you a lot.